Chapter 1. The Gift. The storm had been clawing at the windows all evening, scraping its nails against the glass like it wanted in. Emma sat hunched over her laptop, the pale light from the screen cutting through the darkness of her room. The glow made her face look ghostly, her eyes reflecting the scrolling numbers and thumbnails of antiques, rusted clocks, cracked paintings, and forgotten trinkets. Her mother leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Still hunting for trouble, she teased, her tone half tired, half playful. It's not trouble, Emma muttered. It's history. She clicked on a listing near the bottom of the page. Auction lot number 47, porcelain doll, circa 1890s, condition. Excellent. The photo showed a pale-faced doll in a lace dress, her glass eyes an eerie, washed-out blue. Her lips were painted too delicately, like a secret she would never tell. Beneath the wooden stand, an engraving caught Emma's attention. Lieselot. The description was brief. No origin, no previous owner, no maker's mark. Just one line at the end, written in all caps. Attention, original eyes, do not alter or replace. Creepy, her mother said, leaning closer. Looks like something from a haunted house. Emma smirked. Exactly why I love it. Without hesitation, she clicked bid. The price was absurdly low. Maybe too low. The notification pinged. Congratulations, you've won auction lot number 47. The package arrived 3 days later. It came wrapped in old brown paper, tied with faded string, the kind that crumbles when you touch it. There was no return address, just an uneven scrawl across the top. To Emma. Her mother laughed nervously. Okay, I didn't tell anyone your name, so that's already weird. Emma ignored her. Her pulse quickened as she unwrapped the layers. Inside, the doll rested in straw and linen, as if she'd been sleeping for a century. Her skin was too smooth for something that old. The air smelled faintly of varnish. And something else, something metallic and sour. Emma lifted the doll carefully. The weight surprised her, heavier than expected, almost human. Pinned to the doll's dress was a folded yellowed note. The handwriting was ornate, European. Emma could barely make out the words, "Do not open her eyes before midnight." Probably part of the act, her mother said with a forced laugh. These sellers love their drama. But Emma wasn't listening. The doll's eyelids were painted shut, lashes fine as spider silk. And there was something unsettling about how warm the porcelain felt in her hands. That night, the wind had died down. The house was too quiet. Emma placed Lieselot on her shelf, next to the books and candles. She turned off the lamp, crawled into bed, and scrolled her phone for a while before drifting into uneasy sleep. Somewhere between dreaming and waking, she heard it, a soft click. Her eyes fluttered open. Moonlight spilled through the curtains, silver and thin. On the shelf, the doll's head was now turned, just slightly, facing the bed. Emma sat up, staring, her breath shallow. The air in the room had changed, colder, heavier, charged with something unseen. "Mom?" she whispered. No answer, just the whisper of wind outside. She forced a shaky laugh. Probably fell over a bit, she muttered, though she knew it hadn't. The shelf was solid. Still, she couldn't stop looking at those painted eyelids. In the dim light, she could have sworn, for just a moment, she saw them tremble. Sub-Chapter 2. The Whisper. The next morning, the sunlight broke through the thin curtains, dull and pale. Emma blinked against it, her eyes heavy from a night of half-sleep. The doll sat exactly where she'd left it, or so she told herself, still facing the bed. Her mother peeked into the room, holding a cup of coffee. "You were up late again?" Emma nodded absently, rubbing her eyes. Just couldn't sleep. Her mother smiled, the kind of weary smile parents wear when they're pretending not to worry. "Maybe you shouldn't have that creepy thing staring at you while you sleep." Emma smirked. "You sound like a horror movie, Mum." "Exactly," her mother said, "and those mums always die first." The day passed in quiet unease. At school, Emma caught herself doodling the doll's face in her notebook. Those perfect lips, the faint tilt of the head. She didn't remember deciding to draw it. When she looked closer, she saw she'd shaded the eyes open. That night, she placed Lieselot on her desk instead of the shelf, turning the doll toward the window. She tried to convince herself that it was all imagination, just the tricks of a tired mind. But sometime past 2 a.m., she woke again. A whisper, barely audible, like breath against glass. She froze, her heart thudding against her ribs. Emma, her name. Soft, fragile, unmistakable. She sat up, trembling. Mom? Nothing. Emma. The voice came again, small, childlike, echoing from the dark corner near her desk. Emma's phone screen flared to life as she grabbed it, the glow cutting across the room. The doll sat motionless, eyes still painted shut. But the phone's light flickered, dimmed, and for a fraction of a second, she saw it. The doll's mouth moved. The next morning, her mother found her sitting on the floor, clutching a blanket, staring at the desk. Emma, what happened? I heard her, Emma whispered. She said my name. Her mother sighed. Sweetheart, maybe it's stress. Or, there were fingerprints, Emma interrupted, voice shaking. Her mother frowned. What fingerprints? Emma pointed at the window, tiny smudges on the glass. 5 of them, too small to be her own. Her mother rubbed them away with her sleeve. Probably yours from before. Stop scaring yourself, okay? But when Emma turned back toward the desk, she froze. The doll was facing the bed again. That night, Emma set up her phone camera, placing it on her nightstand aimed at the desk. If you move, she muttered, I'll know. She turned off the lights. The seconds dragged into minutes and minutes into hours. The only sound was the wind outside and the quiet tick of the wall clock. Somewhere around 3, she slipped into uneasy sleep. When she woke, the room was cold. Too cold. The phone was still recording. The doll hadn't moved. But when Emma checked the video later that morning, her stomach clenched. At 2:43 a.m., the footage showed the doll, eyes still painted shut, slowly tilting its head toward the camera. Then faintly, in the static, a whisper, open them. Subchapter 3, The Reflection. The next few days felt like walking through a fog. Emma barely spoke at school. Her friends noticed but didn't push. She'd always been the quiet one. Yet inside, her thoughts spun like a storm. Every night, the whisper returned. Sometimes a soft hum, other times her name, stretched and distant, as if coming from underwater. By Friday, she'd stopped sleeping altogether. Dark circles pooled under her eyes. That evening, her mother knocked on the door. Hey, you've been in here for hours. Come downstairs, have dinner. I'm not hungry, Emma said. Her mother hesitated, eyes flicking toward the doll on the shelf. That thing is starting to creep me out. Maybe put it in the attic for a while. Emma looked at Lieselot, the soft curls, the delicate smile, the shut eyes. A strange protectiveness stirred inside her. She stays, Emma said quietly. She's not hurting anyone. Her mother sighed and left without another word. The house fell silent again. Emma picked up her phone, scrolling through the recorded footage once more. Frame by frame. There, a flicker. At 2:57 a.m., something moved in the mirror behind the doll. Not a reflection, but a figure. A pale girl in a vintage dress, standing where Emma should have been. Emma's breath hitched. She replayed it again. And again, each time the reflection smiled wider. That night, she turned all the mirrors in her room toward the wall, except for one, the vanity mirror above her desk. She wanted proof. She wanted to know if she was losing her mind. She placed the doll in front of the mirror, phone camera rolling once again. Hours passed. The candle beside the mirror burned low. Then, as the flame flickered, the air grew colder, sharp, metallic. A faint creak. Emma's eyes snapped open. The doll's head was turning, slowly, almost thoughtfully. Its painted lids quivered and opened. Behind the glassy eyes, there was something wet, alive. The reflection in the mirror didn't match. The mirrored Lieselot was smiling, lips parted, teeth too human. Emma stumbled backward, knocking over the candle. The flame died with a hiss, plunging the room into darkness. She fumbled for her phone, its weak glow trembling in her hand. The screen showed the doll, sitting perfectly still. But behind her, in the mirror, stood the girl again. Not porcelain now, flesh, pale as milk, eyes empty and hollow. Emma, the voice rasped. Do you remember me? The phone slipped from her grasp. The light spun across the floor, catching one last glimpse of Lieselotte's face. No longer painted, but real. Her eyes blinked. Then everything went black. The days after the first night of terror blurred together. Emma tried to go about her life, but Lieselotte's presence was impossible to ignore. Even when placed across the room, the doll seemed to observe her. Every shadow in her room felt heavier, every creak of the house sharper, as if the walls themselves were alive. One afternoon, Emma noticed something unusual. Sliding her hand along the doll's silk dress, she felt a tiny fold of fabric she hadn't seen before. Curiosity and dread mingled in her stomach. Carefully, she pulled it aside and discovered a bundle of old letters, yellowed and brittle with age. The handwriting was neat and deliberate, looping elegantly across the paper in black ink. Each letter was addressed to a Herr Bauer, a name Emma didn't recognize. As she read the first one aloud in a whisper, the words seemed to echo unnaturally in the room. I gave her a new body, porcelain and pure. But she still calls my name. The letters spoke of Bauer's daughter, Lieselotte, a young girl who had died long ago. The tone was obsessive, almost desperate, as if the father could not bear to let her go. Emma's heart thudded. Somehow this doll, Lieselotte, was connected to these old words, to a life she had never lived. Later that evening, Emma scoured the internet for information about Bauer. Old forums, antique doll collectors, obscure auction records, they all whispered the same thing. Bauer's dolls were cursed. Many had gone missing, and a few had been reported moving on their own or whispering names. Then a message appeared on a forum she had never posted on. If the doll begins to whisper, you are already chosen. Emma's fingers froze over the keyboard. The warning felt less like advice and more like an accusation. Another message followed, private this time, from someone calling himself the Collector. I've been tracking Bauer's creations for decades. You must destroy Lieselotte before midnight on the new moon, or she will consume you. Emma's breath caught. Her hands shook. Was this real, or just some elaborate online prank? That night, fear tangled with resolve. She set up candles, drawing a circle around her desk where the doll sat. She had memorized the collector's instructions from the messages, a ritual to communicate and confront the bound soul. The air grew dense as the flames flickered. Shadows danced on the walls, twisting and stretching like long fingers. Emma's pulse pounded in her ears as she recited the words the collector had instructed her to say, over and over, each syllable shaking on her lips. The doll's head turned slowly, following her movement. Its painted eyes glinted in the candlelight. Then a rasping voice filled the room, not Lieselotte's, but a man's, ancient and cracked. You shouldn't have woken her. The circle of candles flickered violently. The shadows deepened. Emma's stomach lurched as the doll suddenly fell silent. But the house itself seemed to change. Every room felt occupied. The walls breathed, the floorboards creaked under invisible weight, and the air was thick with a metallic scent. Emma realized she wasn't alone. Lieselotte's presence had grown. It was watching, waiting, patient and eternal. The first true confrontation with the doll had passed, but the awakening had only begun. The whispers were no longer faint, and the nights no longer forgiving. Something had moved in, and it wasn't just porcelain. The following morning, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that the house had shifted overnight. Every familiar corner now seemed alien, every shadow suspicious. She examined Lieselotte closely, tracing the delicate curls of her hair, the glassy blue eyes that now seemed almost too alive. Determined to understand, Emma returned to the letters, reading them again and again. One phrase kept haunting her. I gave her a new body, porcelain and pure. But she still calls my name. Bauer had tried to preserve his daughter in some twisted way, binding her spirit to the doll. Emma shivered. She realized Lieselotte wasn't just a toy. She was alive, and the life she carried was not hers. That evening, a strange message appeared on her laptop. The screen flickered, and an image loaded, a black and white photograph of a workshop from the late 1800s. Shelves lined with dolls, tools scattered across tables, and a cracked window catching sunlight. Emma's heart skipped. The shelves, the tools, even the window frame looked familiar. They mirrored her own basement. Her pulse quickened. Could it be? Her house had been built over Bauer's workshop. The very walls she had slept beneath were once the floors of a man obsessed with preserving his daughter's soul. That night, exhaustion pulled her into a vivid dream. She was no longer in her room, but trapped inside the workshop itself. Her hands were small, delicate, and porcelain. She could feel every crack, every chip, and every cold edge of her fingers. A man's whisper floated behind her. "You will live again, my little one." Emma woke with a start. Her hands ached, and she noticed fine cracks appearing along her palms. Heart hammering, she looked at the desk. Lieselot was no longer on the shelf. She sat on Emma's chest, eyes wide open, staring directly at her. Emma froze, the room suddenly cold and silent, except for the faint rustle of fabric. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. The whispers returned, closer this time, circling around her head like a wind. She realized with a jolt, Lieselot wasn't just moving, she was aware. The night deepened, and the room's shadows thickened. Emma's fear gave way to resolve. She remembered the collector's words, the warnings, the ritual. She reached for her phone, documenting everything, hoping that if she survived, someone would know what had happened. The doll's head tilted slowly, following her movements, lifelike and deliberate. Then a voice echoed through the room, ancient, hollow, and impossibly deep. "Every doll must have a soul to stay whole. And now it is yours." Emma's blood ran cold. The realization hit her. The curse wasn't a warning, it was an inheritance. Lieselot's spirit, bound for decades, was seeking a new vessel. And the moment she had interacted with the doll, she had become the target. The candle flames flickered violently, shadows dancing like phantoms on the walls. The room felt alive, breathing, shifting. Emma backed away, but there was nowhere to go. Lieselot followed every movement, eyes piercing, waiting. And then, as the first pale light of dawn seeped into the room, the whispering stopped. Silence settled like a weight. The doll sat perfectly still, as if nothing had happened. Emma, trembling, realized she was alone, or at least no one else could be seen. But the lesson had been delivered. Lieselot's awakening had begun, and there was no turning back. The curse was patient. It would wait, it would watch, and one day, it would come again. Emma sank to the floor, her back against the wall, staring at the doll. She understood now that the battle was far from over. The awakening was complete. Emma barely slept that night. Every corner of the house felt alive, every shadow a whisper of movement. She couldn't ignore it any longer. The truth had to be found. The letters, the photographs, the whispers, they were all pieces of a puzzle she had been too afraid to complete. The collector's messages flashed in her mind. "You must destroy Lieselot before midnight on the new moon." But she knew now that destroying the doll would not be simple. The curse wasn't just in porcelain and paint. It was in something older, deeper, something tied to the very foundation of the house. As she descended into the basement, Emma's steps echoed against the cold concrete. She recognized it immediately. The shelves, the scattered tools, the cracked window. This was Bauer's workshop, the heart of the curse. Dust swirled around her feet. On a table she found fragments of old dolls, cracked faces frozen in silent screams. And there, in the center of it all, sat Lieselot. Not on the desk, not in her room, but here, in the very womb of the doll-maker's obsession. Emma stepped closer, hands trembling. "I know what you are," she whispered, "and I know what you want." The doll's head tilted, eyes glassy, yet piercing. For the first time, its mouth moved without a sound, lips parting as if forming words in a language older than memory. A sudden realization struck her. The collector, the warnings, even the letters. They weren't separate. They were all manifestations of Bauer himself, bound to the creations he had made. He had lingered in the shadows, patient, waiting for someone to awaken Lieselot fully. Emma's chest tightened. The air grew heavier, pressing down on her like water. She could feel the porcelain chill of her own hands, the faint cracking of her skin, the slow transformation she had begun to undergo. "You are mine now," a voice rasped through the room. Not Bauer's, not Lieselot's, but both, one echoing through the other. Every doll needs a soul to stay whole, and yours is the last piece. Emma's heart pounded. adrenaline and fear coursing through her veins. She backed away, but there was nowhere to run. The walls of the basement seemed to stretch, shadows crawling along the surfaces, thickening with every heartbeat. She fell to her knees, gasping, and watched as Lieselotte's eyes glowed faintly, unnaturally. The transformation was almost complete. Emma felt herself slipping, her consciousness pulling back, as if her own body no longer belonged to her. And then, as the clock struck midnight, everything stopped. Silence fell, heavier than anything she had ever felt. Lieselotte's eyes closed, and the room became still. Emma's own eyes opened, glazed, empty, porcelain. Somewhere in the distance, a faint notification pinged. On her desk, a new auction listing had appeared. Lot number 48, porcelain doll, rare. Condition, perfect Emma, or rather the vessel that had once been Emma, sat motionless, a perfect replica of Lieselotte herself. The curse had moved forward, patient and unbroken, waiting for the next hand to bid, the next soul to claim. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees. Somewhere, deep in the darkness of the basement and in the shadows of every forgotten doll, Bauer's legacy endured. And in a quiet corner of the world, a new collector would soon wake to the call of Lieselotte, unaware of the price of curiosity. The curse was complete.